Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hiba Youssef.
I don't have to be everywhere. I also am thinking about operating systems and processes and systems within every single one of those functional areas. So if you're all aligned to the corporate goals and you all have effective processes within your teams, then I think we're all working towards the same priorities and it's not everyone working in silos. I think that's the key there.
Internal, no vowels, pronounced internal, is the platform your creative team didn't know they needed until now. It helps you tap into the hidden passions of your employees with super personalized visual profiles. Want to know your junior designer is not just a designer, but also a Bravo Reddit mod, Bad Bunny stan, and TikTok-obsessed animator? Now you can. In seconds, you'll see your people as they see themselves and match them to projects they actually care about. Unlock all the talent sitting under your own roof. Head to seeyourpeople.com to learn more. Welcome back to another episode of the I Hate It Here pod, where I discuss with my guests aspects of work and how to make it better. This season, I've been focused on Zone of Genius, and today's guest has a pretty killer one: aligning business strategy with people strategies effectively and seeing the big picture of it all. Sometimes I think HR leaders actually struggle with this. I know I did early in my career. So today is a masterclass in exactly that. So hopefully you struggle no more. Joining me today is someone I deeply admire, Halai Shukran. Halai is currently the COO at Pluribus Digital. Prior to becoming the COO, she led the people and talent function and has a deep expertise in managing people, operations, IT, and marketing and comms functions. With her strong foundation and 10 plus years as a strategic HR leader, she excels at managing the delicate balance of business and people strategy. Halai has driven organizational growth by scaling operational infrastructure in startups and mid-sized organizations. She's dedicated to fostering high-performing teams and creating systems that balance business goals with employee experience. And today, she's going to tell you how you can do that too. Halai, welcome to the pod.
Hi, Hiba. Thanks for having me.
I'm so pumped. There's basically no one I would do an early morning podcast recording with other than you.
You know, I'm an early bird. You know, I'm up at like 4 a.m. So I appreciate you this morning for getting up on my time.
I really don't know how you do it, but that's like for another podcast episode. Like, how do you do it all? Because today we're going to talk about how you do the work part. The personal part, I could never wake up at 4 a.m. I'm like in bed till 9 some days.
That's the personal evolution of Halai. That's for another day.
That could be for next season.
Thank you.
We do that episode. That could be really fun, actually, talking about our personal evolutions. Okay, before I get into the meat of our episode today, I've been asking every guest this season, what's one thing HR should rethink?
You know what? I was thinking about this morning and I was like, okay, what do I want to rethink? And I think it goes back to everything that we know that's happening in today's workforce, right? We're seeing a lot of engagement, employee engagement down across all demographics. There's greater employee turnover. People are struggling with balancing remote work and hybrid workplaces. Then you pair that with everything that's happening in HR and the diminishing seat that HR has at the table post-COVID. Can you even say post-COVID right now? When you think back to 2020, HR was at the helm, DEI was prioritized, and now those things are being deprioritized. I think the one thing when I think about rethinking HR and maintaining your seat at the table is just going back to a basics model, right? I think I was like, what can I say? It's not anything groundbreaking, but when I think about my day-to-day and the day-to-day of the people that I interact with very closely in the HR space, like yourself, I go back to something that I heard last week. I went to a conference. It was Aspire in DC. People have probably seen me post about it. Probably a lot of people post about it because there's a lot of cool people there. But one of the things that I heard was from Alan Stein. He's like a strategic basketball coach. He's coached like Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, Steph Curry. You may have heard of him if you love basketball.
Cool.
What you don't see behind the screen is I'm 5'10" and a half. And so I'm also tall and I used to play. But he coached Kobe Bryant. And during that time, he actually attended one of Kobe's like early morning practices, another early bird who would show up at practice at 3:30 a.m. And he was just doing basic drills. And this guy, Alan, was telling the story like, I'm coaching like 12-year-olds and Kobe Bryant, who's at the pinnacle of his career, is doing basic drills. And what he realized in having a conversation with Kobe is like the basics are never going to go away. Those fundamentals are definitely in practice always when you think about your workplace, what you do, your practice, your craft. And so when I think about where our true impact can come is a back to basics model where strategic HR and tactical HR should work together to reinforce the work. Like, don't lose sight of the effective execution when trying to maintain and build upon the seat that you have.
Ooh, that was a mic drop. That was so good. Because I also a basketball player, but I'm only 5'6.5". I stopped growing at 10 or 12. I was taller than everybody for a decent 4 years, okay? And then
Wait, I
everyone
didn't
was
start
way
growing
taller than
until like I was like 16.
no, no, I was like really tall at 10, then everybody else outgrew me and I was the shortest girl. So I also love a basketball example, but that's so right. Like sometimes we do forget about the execution piece. And I always say like my strengths lie in the strategic, but I've really been spending the last honestly like year and a half really honing my like execution craft because I do think no matter how high up you go in an organization, you still have to understand how the work gets done.
Yeah. And I think it's also like you have somebody's ear, they're paying attention, you have the seat. Don't let it falter. I mean, we all make mistakes and there are opportunities to build and grow from that, but really honing in on the craft of like effective execution, putting processes in place and systems in place enable you to keep people's attention. And that's what I want people to rethink.
Oh, I love that. Okay, well, God, this is making me so excited for this episode. I'm such a fucking dork. Okay, today I want to talk about your zone of genius. So you have this amazing talent for seeing the big picture and really understanding how all of these puzzle pieces across an organization come together. You started in people, but now you're the COO, which is really organizing all of that, those puzzle pieces to make an organization thrive. So how did you discover that this was kind of your skill, your sweet spot?
First of all, like everyone else in HR, the majority of us, I kind of fell into HR, right? It's not something I thought I would ever be doing, nor did I even know what it meant. I started in broadcast journalism. I just said, you know what? I don't want to be in DC anymore. I want to be somewhere else. I thought I would end up in New York, and somehow I ended up in LA. Again, part of that personal evolution story for another day. But I fell into HR, honestly, in a corporate training role. And I had no idea what HR was. And I think what I did, going back to the basics, right? At the time, I also had time to do this, but I read anything and everything that came my way, whether it was professional within the workplace or professional outside of the workplace. I listened in meetings. I started to explore my curiosity in different aspects of the business. And I'm not going to condone this in any way, shape, or form. And I speak a lot about this and how to kind of come out of that. But I honestly think a lot of my immigrant mentality that kind of lived in my household growing up made me that way, right? It made me more resistant to like ask questions for fear of like being pinpointed as someone who didn't know a thing. So I just took it upon myself to read and learn on my own because I know I needed to be resourceful. I knew I didn't have the opportunity to fail. I knew that, you know, what may be available to others in terms of opportunity and success or not. So I have to maximize everything that comes to me and figure it out, whether that was on my own or not. But I think what that did for me is it naturally gave me an opportunity to like learn more about the business. And I had a CHRO at the time that basically was like, you need to know the business. You need to know the business. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I just need to do my job.
What does that mean exactly?
I'm 24, 25. Like, what does that mean? Like, is this going to help me do the thing that you asked me to get done by 5 p.m. or what? But I think what I
Yeah.
realized is, you know, I never got my MBA, right? But what I did was I realized like there's so much to learn from other people around you and other business unit leaders that impact your own job. And I think I started to learn very soon that you get a seat at the table when you speak other people's language and you mirror their language versus leading with HR principles and HR speak. So I think that's part of it. And then also, you know, I worked all throughout college. I worked all throughout high school when I could, when it was legal. And it was all like service and retail jobs. And then naturally in those industries, you're asking the person about their needs first, right? You're leading with an understanding of getting to know them. And so that naturally played into who I was, regardless if I knew anything about HR or not.
I First of all, there's so much about what you said that is so similar to my own story too. Like I think about why the immigrant mentality I have from like what my parents taught me when they immigrated to the States of like always seeking answers and being curious and really listening when people are trying to tell you something. I think that has helped me so much in the workplace as well. And I too also worked in the service industry in high school. In college, I was like an RA and I used to call people for money for our college. So I've spent a lot of time like asking people about their needs and what they want. But also, I think it's interesting because you also, when you do those jobs, you observe so much of human behavior. And it's almost like in the next meeting, I'm like, oh, I know what everyone's going to do here. I know how everyone's going to
Yeah.
react.
And
And it's
listen, we
just,
got a lot of family and stuff too. You know how to, you learn how to read the room in your personal life and you apply that to your professional life as well.
yeah, I do not. When my family's heated, I'm like, I'm good. I'm the peacekeeper here. I'm just going to exit this conversation because I'm going to get stressed out and cry. Like, I got to go.
Oh, we'll talk about boundaries later in the workplace. Again, personal evolution too.
Okay, so something really interesting about your journey is you've seen organizations through like rapid growth and change. How do you ensure that like the business and the people strategy actually remain aligned during those times because it's so easy for it to just get out of hand?
I think like that is something that, I had to learn how to make sure the business and a people strategies align, right? There was so much happening. I mean, going back to what I said I did in my junior aspects of my career in, learning and reading everything, you don't have the bandwidth or the time when things are rapidly evolving. But I've always been in a tech environment in my career, regardless of industry. I've worked with software engineers, I've worked with the designers, I've worked with folks in the delivery space, product management space. And so I've grown accustomed to agile practices and product management principles, right? And I think the core of that is this constant focus on iteration and feedback and making sure you have the right stakeholders involved and essentially being the CEO of your product and your program or initiative and understanding the why, right? Like, do I know why you need this before I pitch it to you? I think those are core fundamentals, not only in the tech space, but it should be core fundamentals in how you work in any department or function in a business. And I think that allows people to be nimble and respond to needs in times of flux or change. But one of the things that I realized also is like people don't understand how to do that, right? And they don't know what that means. And I think what companies can get a lot of value out of is basically focusing in on how do you teach people about the business, right? Like onboarding programs falter when you don't create a brand around your business and like this is how you pitch the business regardless if you're in a sales position or not. Like these are the things that I love talking to people about because you realize like I just said like I didn't have an MBA and like that's probably one of my biggest regrets. But I realized like you can establish mini MBA programs within your business, right? Like think about your high potential people. What are they lacking in terms of business knowledge that they have and technical skill set and give them that information so they can apply those same product management and agile practices to their day-to-day so they can, essentially support the company in times of change.
Yeah. That's such a good point. I mean, like I think it's funny you started in corporate training. I also started in L&D, and so I'm always like, train it. It's got to be trained. Everything at work has got to be trained, especially when it comes to like the business strategy. Because I think a lot of people just don't understand it. And if your employees can't tell you how your company makes money and what it wants to do next, like you have a real problem on your hand.
Oh, I rolled my eyes. I probably shouldn't have, but I'm like, please know that. Everybody, did you just hear what Hiba said? Double click on that.
Please pay attention. If you could not articulate how this company makes money, we are in dire straits. I mean, it's a thing I think a lot of people forget about, but it then should drive and inform a lot of our people strategies. Is this business making money? Are we rapidly growing and scaling? What does that mean for our people strategies? Like all these questions we should be asking. And I love that you mentioned the agile methodology because I also started and I've worked historically in tech companies. And there's something about like a little 2-week sprint that's like so sexy to me. I'm like, yeah, like I'm such a fucking dork because I'm like, yeah, agile. And I like remember when they used to develop software in the waterfall style. And it's really interesting talking to engineers as we talk about these things because agile just made us move faster to a certain extent, but also then gave us more chance to like experiment and learn from our mistakes.
In today's state of the world, you don't have the benefit of time on your side when it comes to waterfall methodologies, right? You think by the time you get to the end point of what you're trying to accomplish, everything has already changed. So if you're not implementing constant iteration into your processes and responding to customer feedback, and in this case, it's your people, then what's the point of all the work and effort that you're putting in?
I think you and I have both read Jessica Zwan's Built for People book, where she talks about how you should build your people function like a product.
Yes.
She's been on the podcast. She was like on one of the earliest seasons. I actually need to catch up with her soon. But her book is so good, and it's like mind boggling to me that it's not on every single person's list. Every once in a while, I see someone on LinkedIn posting about it, and I'm like, yes, everyone needs to read this damn book.
Yeah, I had seen the book for so long, like everywhere, right? Like people posting about it. And then actually, I was lucky enough to attend an event in New York with you where she was a speaker on a panel. And she was the one that actually made me realize, like, wait, like this, what I'm doing is not just a product of me being in tech environments. It actually makes sense and it should be applied in day to day people strategy and how we work. And honestly, her career path also taught me that, like, hey, if I'm able to align business strategy and operations with people, then a COO path makes sense. Look, there's a successful person sitting in front of me that has the ear of people because she's able to talk about it in those ways and talk about people strategy in those ways. So I'm super grateful to that event, to you, and to meeting her in person, understanding not only kind of what she does and what the book entailed, but also her career path because it
Yeah,
makes sense.
I
HR
do.
people can be at the helm of business and in the number two seat.
I do think we would see. I do think we're going to see. I wrote about like the CPO to the CEO path. I do think a lot of people should go also to the COO path because there's so much stuff that we do in people ops, like in people work, that really also is like beautifully falls into like the COO style work, like organizing and aligning all of these things together. And I think that it's going to be more people are going to do that. I don't know if I would ever do it, but I can't wait for you to tell us more about how you do it because I don't know if it's for me. And maybe somebody listening is thinking like they want to be a COO someday.
And
Um,
honestly, like I think when I think about talent management and like the shift that happened 10 years ago was like people were talking about the heads of HR being more talent management focused and how that transition was happening. How beautiful is it for us as people leaders to now hear the path from CPO to CEO and the growth there.
yeah, there's so many interesting paths our lives can take. And I think a big part of it is because the people work is like deeply challenging in a lot of ways. And I like organizational challenges can be so meaty and so hard to solve. And so I'm dire to know from you like what is your process for actually diagnosing organizational challenges and identifying all these key pieces that need alignment?
I've been at small to medium sized businesses. I've helped companies scale up, and the root of everything in terms of diagnosing organizational challenges has always been data, 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 right? Like, what are you doing to do a comprehensive organizational assessment? How are you establishing KPIs? Do you even have metrics to provide for your individual business unit, regardless of where you sit? How are you mapping out roles and processes? Like, I talk to leaders all the time and understand the dynamics and play of like the leadership and the middle management structure. How are they supported? And what are some qualitative anecdotal points that you're getting from them to feed your quantitative data, right? I think that's so key to everything that we do in business. But I think where people teams can falter is not keeping that at the center of their proposals, at forefront of discussions with business unit leaders, and really talking through like not just people strategy, but like if you don't do a thing, your business will suffer for the following reasons. And let me tell you how that plays out in terms of how I enhance the employee experience. But that part comes last, right? So diagnosing organizational challenges is all rooted in data. Big advocate of it. I'm not saying like I am a data expert, but I am the idea, in this case, I'm the CEO of data, where I come up with all the ideas and how we should kind of present things, how we should collect data, and then really working with the right people that are the analytics experts to figure out what are the best ways to collect that data and build a story and build a narrative.
Yeah, I recently, actually this was yesterday, I'll tell a real life story. I like had a proposal for something I wanted us to do at work, and I was presenting it to like my CEO and my COO, and I was like, "What do you all think? Like, should we do this?" And my CEO goes, "I'm sorry, what are we gonna like? What are we gonna get out of the data from this? Like what are we gonna do with the data?" And what do you think? Like, you can, like, looking at these questions, it was about an engagement survey. He's like, looking at these questions, like,
Yeah.
what do you think we're actually going to do with the data? And I like started to say something. And then I was like, actually, he's right. Like, the questions were too broad. The data wasn't going to actually be helpful data for us to diagnose any real problems. For small organizations, like, anonymity is hard. And in that moment, I like wanted to kick myself because I was like, what am I doing? This was like a rookie
Why did I
move.
set myself up?
This was a rookie move that I just set myself up for, but because I forgot, and data is like one of my favorite things. It's my love language. But I
Yeah.
forgot to ask my question. Like, I forgot to ask myself, like, what am I actually going to do with this data? And is the answer good enough that it could convince other people that it's worth our time?
And I think that goes back to like, listen, HR people are stretched thin. We're busy, on the brink of burnout, some of us, right? We're like, our teams are scaled down. And then sometimes we get in the monotony of doing. I find myself as the COO right now doing some of the most administrative things that I'm like, is this impacting anything? Like, if I don't do the thing, how does that hinder the business? How does that hinder people? How does that set our company back? And I realize, okay, yes, I may have to do this, but maybe not right now. And I think breaking up that monotony and taking a seat, like a back seat, and understanding, okay, if I'm looking at it from above and I'm saying, what am I doing? What is this impacting? What OKRs is it driving? Is it going to help us achieve a certain thing? How are people going to respond to these questions? And therefore, like, I sometimes write surveys and then I'm like, when I get responses, I'm like, I got nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Why did I even do this?
is it a lazy person responding to the survey who just wants to say they did it? Check, check, check. They're also trying to break up the monotony of their day by doing a quick survey. Or is it truly because I could ask better questions that give us more data and that helps me do my job effectively and do things that move the needle forward? So I love that you said that because data can only go so far. I mean, good input is equals good output. So I think that's super important.
Yeah. And especially when diagnosing challenges, is like having that data. Cause I feel like so much of what we do in HR, we're like, oh, I have a gut feeling. Oh, I feel this, or I observed this. And it's like, sometimes we actually need the data to be like, no, look, this is actually a problem. It's not me feeling that it's a problem. It's a real problem right here. People are saying on a survey, they're not getting the support they need from their manager. It's not
Yeah.
me thinking our managers are not giving, it's literally the employees saying it. So I love that you brought that up. And then like we talked about how burnt out so many people are, honestly, myself included. Probably I need to go solve that problem another day. But I think part of it is some people are not really good at like prioritizing. And so how do you prioritize? And I have to put this caveat on it, like, especially when resources are limited, because I feel like we are all strapped right now.
I don't have any money. Okay.
Yeah, I
What do
got
you want me to do with
no
that?
money. Yeah, I got no money, no budget, leave me alone.
Please call me back in 2 years. Add me to your callback list in your CRM, but
Yeah.
put 2027 in your callback timeframe. Been there, done that. But when I think about priorities, it's so interesting because, like, I think saying when resources are limited are very important because, so many people have established operating systems within their business, and that's rooted in all of the people, all the resources, all the budget. And I think, when we take a step back, when resources are limited, I would encourage all HR professionals to really asked to have a seat at the table within their own HR teams to really understand why resources are limited, right? When they think about prioritizing, they should be a part of the budgeting exercise. I think that's one caveat that I want to kind of mention is that I think HR departments, people teams fall short when budgeting is not a collaborative exercise, right? So I've definitely been there where like Somebody goes to bat for me, doesn't really, and puts something in the budget for my L&D team. And then I realize like that does nothing for me to serve my purpose for the year. And you don't even understand the priorities of the business to understand why we need to focus on L&D or why I'm okay with the limited budget this year because we should focus that effort elsewhere within the HR team. I think that's first and foremost. But I think like when we think about, you know, prioritization relative to limited resources, assess impact versus effort, right? Like what is actually going to be high impact, low effort, and prioritize those projects first, right? Because where you have the ear of the business is that it's high impact. And where you have the ear of your HR team is that it's low effort, right? Like I'm not asking you with limited resources and limited people and limited bandwidth to spend all this time and energy and work hours into the night because this is going to impact the business. Prioritize the things that are high impact, low effort, right? That's the low hanging fruit. That's where you can really have the opportunity to shine and leverage the data that we were just talking about to determine what is high impact and then understand what could be low effort, right? And low effort could mean you already have systems in place to support a thing. The processes already exist. You may need to revamp and meet with stakeholders to identify where tweaks can be made in supporting employees, supporting their experience, supporting retention. So I think that's key. I think, it sounds super, super simple, but just identify what is high impact for the business and identify what's low effort for your team.
For 12 years, the world's most innovative brands have trusted Working Not Working to find top-tier creative talent. Now they're helping you keep that talent with Internal. No vowels, pronounced internal. Internal is your go-to platform for unlocking the hidden passions of your team. With super personalized profiles, you can dig into your people's ambitions, interests, and secret skills in seconds. Who knew your project manager was a national champion pickleball player, D&D Dungeon Master, and a karaoke queen? Visit seeyourpeople.com and start matching your team's passion to the work that lights them up. I'm going to be thinking about that today when I go back to look at my task list for next year, because I'd be trying to do too much probably. I think that's the thing too, is like realizing you don't have to do everything. Like you're right. If it's not high impact to the business, why are you doing it?
No. Again, going back to my 25-year-old self, I did way too much.
I did way too much. I was like, not worth it. You're right. And I think we all really need to like critically ask ourselves that question, because some days I'm like, everything is high impact, everything. And then in the reality at night, I'm like, did I really need to be doing that? Was that really actually going to move the needle for our business forward? Was that really going to remove roadblocks for our people and have them be more successful in their role? No.
And I think it goes back to this is important to say. It's part of your personal evolution, right? Like, is it work hard or work smarter, right? Like, where did that immigrant mentality? It got me a seat at the table and just showing people that I know a thing. But is that sustainable long term to do everything that may or may not have high impact? So I think just like the resetting of expectations and level setting yourself against the needs of the business is also important. Like look in the mirror and say, like, what are you doing day to day, and break that up.
Mostly I'm looking in the mirror and I'm thinking my eyebrows are never going to be twins. They're always going to be sisters. So, but I will also look in the mirror and ask about what I'm really doing at work, Halai. That's good.
There's
good
a
piece
lot
of
of
advice.
conversations happening in the mirror in the morning. Okay. There's some affirmations being thrown out. Like you're going to kill it at the gym this morning. It's 5 a.m. You're tired, but you're going to get your 10,000 steps and your workout in before 8 a.m.
I love that. Mine is like, I look in the mirror and I'm like, don't yell at anyone today. To be very clear, I don't yell at anyone ever. But like, there are some days where I'm like, man, I wish I could yell at someone today because I would do it.
Oh, those are midday mirror exercises. So after you've gone through a couple meetings and you're like, chill out, Halai. Don't end the day on a bad note. You started it really well. Check yourself.
Don't be asking rhetorical questions in meetings like, do you really need my expertise on that? No, I'm just kidding. Like there are times where in the middle of the day, I'm like, I should not be having meetings because I'm going to say something foul.
Per my last email.
Yeah, per my last email. You brought up a really good point though on like balancing the needs of the business with the needs of the people. How can you actually do that? Because I think It's so hard some days where I'm like, I have to do this because it's for the business and it's not for the people. And it's so tough to balance when to make this happen. So, how do you do it when you're making decisions?
Listen, it's tough, right? Like towing that line is hard in HR. And you think about that, like even as a business unit, because unless you're the owner of the business, you are an employee yourself. There is something that is also impacting you, your day to day, your compensation, your benefits, like all of the above, right? Like I'm also not here working for free, you know? So definitely not. Because we need to fix those eyebrows, you know what I'm saying? So we need money for that. But I had to say it, I had to
Run
say
me
it.
for filth, okay? I don't know why they're not even. I'm working on it.
Listen, we all got issues, okay? But I think like honestly, at the end of the day, I think you sit smack dab in the middle of that and you have to remove the personal aspect. But when you remove the personal aspect, I think the way that you can create impact for both sides, business unit leaders, with the employees, the day-to-day employees, is I always look at things from the aspect of like purposeful growth, right? Like what am I doing to understand where there are mutual benefits in a thing, right? Like when I think about scaling operations, right? And that's kind of where a lot of my day to day sits right now. I think, okay, we need to develop more processes and improve systems. And that's what we need from an operational excellence perspective. But if those processes and those systems aren't designed to improve employee efficiencies and support retention, enable employees to do their job and keep them engaged, then what ROI are you really driving? Right. And so I think looking at things from that lens of purposeful growth allows you to understand the impact above and the impact below. And then it gives you your communication strategy for saying why we're prioritizing this over something else that may not be read well by the business or it may not be read well by employees. And I think that's where understanding it from that lens and then having the effective communication strategy alongside that allows us to look at it from two different ways and like allows us to toe the line a little bit more easily because you're still towing the line but you're able to effectively communicate how it impacts both sides.
Yeah, I wish sometimes employees realized that we are also employees more.
Yeah.
I feel like they always think like I hate when people are like HR's not your friend. I'm like, yeah, HR's it's not supposed to be your friend. Neither is
Nope.
finance, by the way. Neither is engineering. Neither is the CEO. None of us are your friends. We are trying to operate a business and do our best. And if you're really lucky, you work in an environment where they want to operate the business and also treat the people right,
Yep.
but sometimes it's a give and take. And it's like really hard. Like I think about my mom the other week was so funny, or like a few months ago, like early in my HR career, when I told her that I was the person responsible for firing people, she was like, "No, Hiba, you can't do that. They're gonna be so mad at you." And I'm like, it's my job though, but like I have to do this. Like it's a decision that is being made, and I'm the person who communicates it, and the manager's there, but like I have to do the firing, and it's tough. And I have so much empathy for the person losing their job, but I'm
Correct.
also like, this feels hard for me too, because ultimately, you're right. I'm not the business owner. Some of these decisions I don't really get to make. I get to give my guidance on how they're done, but ultimately, the decision is not mine to make. And I wish more employees realized that. Like,
Ugh, that's so, I just want to touch on that because I think that's the thing that like, you hear it like, oh my God, like my parents are always worried, like when I do layoffs or anything like that, like, are you worried about like what people are going to do, what they're going to say, like the implications, like following that day, you know?
yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
like, listen, at the end of the day, if you treat people with dignity and respect, that's all that matters, right? Like I know that when I do oftentimes like terminations that people are not expecting, if it's a layoff, I almost always say, I'm going to say a lot because all the logistics,
yeah,
right? Like all the
yeah.
paperwork. I'm like,
Well,
I'm going to say a lot. And if you tune me out because you're just processing and none of this makes sense and you're like, I can't even listen to Halai talk about paperwork right now, then you can do that. This is my cell phone number. This is my email.
I do
Feel
the
free to
same
call
thing.
me because at the end of the day, what I tell myself internally is I'm walking back into my job tomorrow. Right.
Yeah.
And so they are not. And so you have to look at things from a dignity, respect, and compassionate lens to say, like, how can I support this person in
Yeah.
a time where they're just like marinating on a lot of things being thrown at them?
Yeah, I also think like there's all these funny TikToks that are like, I'm the villain in someone's story. I absolutely am the villain in a lot of people's story, honestly. If I'm the last person they saw before they lost their job, like, and all I did was try my hardest to make it like as amenable as possible, but they still lost their job, which is like very scary, especially in this economy, especially knowing our average stats were like an average American doesn't have enough money to cover a catastrophic event and savings. Like there's so much I know about that. And it like honestly some days weighs on my soul because I'm like, God, when I meet my maker or the person I believe I'm going to meet someday, like, is he going to be like, you really fired a lot of those people? And like, you didn't do right. And I'm like, it's not my business. Like I didn't make that choice. Like, so I'm laughing about that, but I think it's just really interesting because like it's sometimes impossible to win the game of balancing business and balancing people strategies. And I want to destigmatize that more for more people leaders where sometimes something has to give. And that might mean you have to make a decision for the business. That might not be the best decision for the people, but you also need to make sure the business continues to exist so that the remaining people still have jobs.
And just listen to people. I think sometimes people just want to feel seen and heard, right? Like it's not the best decision for them, and they're ultimately still going to be mad at you, right? And you're not
For
always going to
sure.
make the right decisions for people, but I think just people want to make sure that like their voice is heard, right? And it's like it's not always going to drive any strategy or any decision, but that's where like, you take some of that and you apply it elsewhere, or if there's something else that may impact them in the long term, you remember that data point from before of something that was important to them, and you bring that back up and you say, hey, we actually approached it this way because I remember 2 years ago or a year ago or 5 months ago or a day ago we couldn't do this for you, but now we can, and let me tell you why your input kind of drove some of this. I think that's at the root of everything. It's just people and vulnerability.
And being kind. I'm like, if I am having to make a hard decision about something that's going to impact your life and your livelihood, and I'm doing my best to be like as kind to you as possible, which I always am, sometimes I expect the kindness to be returned. And I have to remember that like that's not the case for everyone. Like I used to take it really personal when people would get mad at me about business decisions. And now I'm like, hey, read the room. Like is it my name? Is it my name and then CEO afterwards? No. Is it my name and I'm the person who owns this company? No. So like understand that I'm also here to try to do something. And like even in the hard times, I'm going to do it as kindly as possible. But sometimes hard decisions have to be made to keep businesses going. So
And
that's
you're
just my one tangent. I had to say it because
I love
it comes up so much where I feel like we're always at the center of this conflict between the business things we have to do and how the employees feel. And I just know it weighs on so many people every day because they're like, this feels
that.
so hard all the time.
Yeah.
Um, okay, pivoting for a second. I want to like wrap up the rest of the episode talking, maybe like touching lightly on execution. We've talked about a lot of execution pieces and then really focusing on some like leadership and advice and future. I always end with advice and future, but on execution, we were chatting before my brief tangent about like prioritization and how to make the right decisions. Like I have to ask you, COOs see things across an organization more than I think HR does. Like HR is organizational wide, but I do think COOs are always thinking about like every function and multiple teams and multiple projects. So how do you actually approach prioritization when you're working across those multiple teams?
I attend every meeting. I read every email. No, I'm just kidding. I
I was
totally
like, every meeting, hell, not be in decline.
gotta start at 4 a.m. for a reason, right? No, I'm just kidding. That is absolutely no longer like something I can do, right? And so you think about, where should I focus my time, right? If you are in a seat like I am currently as the COO of the business, you have an opportunity to drive OKRs and establishing corporate goals, right? Like when you think about how we kind of take visionary ideas and thoughts from a CEO and the rest of the leadership team and translate it downwards, is really talking about what are those corporate goals, and if all my different departments that sit under my purview are aligned to corporate APRs, then naturally there's going to be some overlap in priorities, right? And when you think about that, that's where effective cross-team collaboration thrives, right? It's like we're all driving to a thing. And so I can't be everywhere at once. I can't make sure that everyone is executing effectively, but we all know exactly where we need to be as a business. And if the individual business unit leaders that maybe report to me or work with me are all aligned to those corporate goals, then we know exactly where we all need to be at any given time and how we need to work together to make sure that we're accomplishing said goals, because goals naturally outlines priorities. And naturally, there's going to be a leader on a specific area of a corporate OKR, especially when you're thinking about cross team collaboration. You can't have two different departments driving toward the same end goal and not work with one another. And I think those sense of shared priorities allows me to be more effective managing multiple business units, right? And I don't have to be everywhere. I also am thinking about operating systems and processes and systems within every single one of those functional areas. So if you're all aligned to the corporate goals and you all have effective processes within your teams, then I think we're all working towards the same priorities and it's not everyone working in silos. I think that's the key there.
Dang. I really don't think I could ever be a COO, honestly. I
Listen,
I
so
got
like
I got
there's
stressed listening to you talk about that.
there's so much, I think, honestly, when I think about my career, there's so much I naturally wanted to do relative to processes outside of HR that made my job more easy. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be like, listen, if I could just tell this person that if you just like fix this and do this and create this process, like, honestly, our meetings would go from like twice a week to maybe once a week to never. And we would just get this done, signed, sealed, and delivered. And so that naturally also made me realize that I didn't want to impact other areas. It's not because I wanted to do it all. It's because I really thought about like, how can I give myself more time to like maybe go to bed early, go to happy hour, and like how can I create some efficiencies where like I find that balance and I also find that purpose and like saying like, hey, I'm able to do a thing, I'm able to be successful in my job, but that also doesn't mean that I'm working all hours of the day and prioritizing everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe okay, I'll reconsider it. I'll maybe consider being a COO
You can do
someday.
it. You can do it. Trust me. Like what I think this is what I would love people leaders to hear is that you definitely should understand all aspects of the business to support people because your people sit in all different areas of the business. And if you are focusing in on doing your job effective as an HR people leader, you have every opportunity to sit in those C-level positions outside of a CHRO or a chief people officer role because why not? Like, why? Why should you be not available for those positions, right? I think, Emma, you can do it. Let's talk.
Yeah, we are. Come on, hi. You know, my dream is just to like win the lotto and just, fix the
Let's,
world's problems.
yeah, take me with you.
I wish. I'm just like, I would do such good things with lotto money. I feel like I've now said it enough times that I'm manifesting it.
We
Just to
already
be
know what your preference sheet will include on a
Yeah,
yacht. Okay,
of
we've
course.
talked.
Yes. Okay. Also, just for everyone to know, I do not play the lotto. So I just would like to win it without actually participating and doing the things it takes to win it.
What?
Exactly. It's high level of delusion. I'm like, I want to win the lotto, but then I never go buy a lotto ticket.
Can you
I
imagine the Powerball numbers? They like totally break that machine and they're like, it's actually just him a year ago.
She just won this. No Powerball tonight. We know she's going to do good things with this. Oh man, maybe someday we'll see. Okay, I love the little pep talk you gave me. So, I mean, you're in this role, you're always seeing this bigger picture. How did that influence like your approach to leadership and decision making?
Honestly, I think what it enabled me to do is just I think I go back to my 25-year-old self, right? And I think about everything that I did and information I want to share that I gained during that time. And so, what it's been able to do for me as a leader is just come from a level of empathy and compassion for those that are struggling to learn the business, those that are struggling to be effective in their jobs. I'm going through a process right now where I'm hiring for my team, and on every single call, you can call them and ask them yourself. I've told them, I say, I look at this role as partnership amongst us. Like you are going to report to the COO, but who cares? Like we are partners in business together. And I can only be as effective in my job with how effective you are. Help me help you. We'll help one another. Let's falter in front of one another. And so that element of allowing my teams to be vulnerable and giving them the time and the space to execute and go back to the basis and learn the fundamentals of business, and sharing where I faltered, right? Again, going back to my L&D days,
Yeah.
I still do it today. I am the most self-deprecating individual on the planet. So I'm always let me tell y'all where I made a mistake. I'm always throwing myself under the bus. The things that people are whoa, I can't believe Halai just shared that she's done this before. I want them to know that it's okay. Right. And I want them to know that you learn from the mistakes that you make. And let me tell you if you don't feel comfortable sharing anything and you don't find that safe space within your teams or your business, find it within your HR teams, find it within certain leaders, where you can just go and use them as a sounding board. So I think that bigger picture, but also my experience in establishing that bigger picture has allowed me to be a more empathetic and vulnerable leader. And I've definitely applied that to my day-to-day practices, but it also helps me take those influences and those conversations up the chain and talking to my CEO, hey, I'm very vulnerable. I'm not afraid to show weakness. I'm not afraid to say I'm going to do something wrong, which probably helps me establish more trust with the business as well.
I would say so. That sounds lovely. I mean,
I hope so. Well, my
I'll,
CEO.
I'll tell her. I'll be like, hey, Holly's the best. To be very clear. Do you ever see that meme that's there was a woman and her little sister was writing into her office, telling her office that she deserved a raise or a promotion? It's
No.
like a meme. I have to go find it. It's so
And
funny. But I think about that all the time because I'm I should be writing all my friends' CEOs and be like, hey, just an FYI, you work with a really great person. You should appreciate them more. Like,
no, I will say this, one small tidbit. I know you're going to get to advice later, but I think
yeah.
that what is important to hear, me growing too late in my career, in my opinion, my HR community and finding the people that I gel with the most actually led me to my COO job today. I think I've explained this to you before, Hiba. I joined your safe space community through my mentor, Sarka Lamont, shout out. Essentially doing that, getting exposure to the community in person at Transform this year, talking to people about my career path, meeting Jessica Zwan through you, and then also being connected to my executive coach through the safe space community and my HR community made me realize a COO path is relevant for me. I'm basically doing all the things without the title. And I want people leaders to hear that part of understanding your business is also understanding yourself and being vulnerable enough to say I need help, or I'd love to talk this through with people that would get it. And you don't ever know where you land when you have those types of conversations and expand your network.
I have made so many friends on the internet in the past 2 years. It's unhinged. like we're real life friends now. I see you. I might see you this weekend. So you can make friends and I have my college friends, I have my friends from home, I have my childhood friends, but I think having friends that genuinely understand the struggle you are facing in this job, especially in HR, is a different type of bonding. It doesn't become the only thing you and I talk about, but I know I can call you and be like, hey, this thing made me really mad. I am about to burst into tears. What do I do? And that you would be like, okay, let's walk it through. We end up giving each other advice and be like, move on. And I think having that is yes, I have my girlfriends who I can call and tell them everything going on in my life and they'll give me some advice. But having people who really understand it, honestly, changed my life. Not to be corny. It really changed my life.
Ditto.
So I think that's a great piece of a leadership tip. Okay, but advice. Now our fun part. What advice would you give to leaders who want to cultivate that mindset, the mindset that you have, that big picture, integrating business goals, people focused strategies?
I've said this time and time again in my career, right? Embrace curiosity. It's the most undervalued competency in leadership, in your jobs, and in terms of being effective in your roles. I think you don't you don't have to know it all, but you have to find comfort in knowing that people don't expect you to know it all, right? Let go of that imposter syndrome. And I used to always again, I'm remote now, but like, honestly, some of the things that I lose not seeing people in person are those organic conversations that take place. And honestly, those are data points for you, right? Like, imagine going to an engineering leader, you're an HR person, and you're going to an engineering leader and you're showcasing interest in like how many terabytes of data they process per minute with the work that they do on their platform. And I've actually had that conversation, and they like nerd out on like telling me all about the technology, and I was like super interested, right? I'm like, wait, I didn't even know that we do that, and I didn't even understand the scale of the terabytes of data that we process per minute. What does that do? One, it allows you to open doors and build relationships with people outside of your scope of work. And it just helps you understand the business and the priorities a bit more from their lens. And then you think, okay, if I'm a recruiter in HR and I'm talking to engineering candidates, they want to hear that sexy stuff. They want to hear the scale and frequency and the impact of the work that they're doing, especially if they want to do hands-on work. So like, think about it. It doesn't have a direct correlation, but if you are embracing curiosity and naturally you're processing information as it comes to you, you should be able to apply that to your day-to-day, and that has long-term impact.
Yeah. I always say like curiosity is one of my three core values. Two, I think curiosity and is just going to change the way we do HR, like being more curious about why we do everything. I just did a talk on this actually last week where I said like curiosity and creativity are the two skills I think that make an HR leader unlike any other, that really set them apart from past HR leaders. It's embracing why things are the way they are and using creativity to like change them.
1,000%.
I love that. Okay, so I love a future question. So one last question. Looking ahead, what excites you about the intersection of business and people strategies in the future of work?
Yeah, and I don't like, again, this is very simplistic, and it's probably relative to kind of how I work, right? I think about like the basics. I think there's so many opportunities when we think about trends going into the next year, right? Like, everything is about personalization. Everything is about a custom experience. Everything is like, hey, listen, generational differences, workforce differences, people at home, people in office, the hybrid situation. There's no more one size fits all, right? And you realize that when you're talking to individuals, when you're talking to candidates, that like this person has this specific need and that's what resonates with them. This person wants to get to 200K in compensation in the next 3 years because they need to, make sure their spouse can retire or whatever it may be. And when you think about those different anecdotes relative to the employee experience, you really have to sit with your centers of excellence, your SMEs, your business unit leaders, and understand, what are the elements of our business and people strategy that are most impactful for your teams. Use data to drive those conversations. And that naturally also gives your people teams an opportunity to flex into growth in areas outside of core HR, because they're thinking about, how can I take my existing knowledge of what the employee experience should be and customize it based on what this business unit leader is telling me. So again, it goes back to what you just said. You can flex a little bit of creativity as well. So I think that is super, super important. And I think when I think about just next year, kind of that's what I would focus on
Yeah.
essentially.
Personalization is everything. I like look forward to my Netflix recommendations, honestly. I'm like, yes, recommend something I will binge in the next 48 hours. Thank you.
No, don't get my
Halai,
Spotify wrapped. It's all over the place.
my Spotify rap was questionable, honestly. It was questionable, but it tracked for most of it. Thank you so, so much for spending an hour of your morning with me and to just dropping your wealth of knowledge. You have left me with so much to think about how I do my job. And honestly, I love seeing people leaders who have such a people mind also pursue other career paths and really be that strategic partner in a room. And it's so cool to see your path go from people to being a COO. And I think a lot of people are considering other paths as well. And so I think don't be surprised if a ton of people reach out to you after this episode, because I think they'll want to be your friend, one, but two, also because they'll want to learn from you. So thank you so, so much. For people who want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Honestly, LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn, Halai Shukran. I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to chat. I'd love to talk to other like first generation Americans and talk about kind of some of the struggles and sharing with them and how they can expand beyond that or grow their career. Yeah, but I'm super, super grateful to you for starting at 9 a.m. Thanks for starting at my time.
I can't. I'm going to tell every single person who I know this week that I got up at and was ready with a full face of makeup at 9 a.m. for a podcast. They're going to be like, you literally don't take morning classes anymore because you like to sleep till 9 a.m. I am taking a morning class tomorrow, though, so let's just celebrate that. I'm taking an 8:30.
Oh, I text you at 4:30 a.m. and you respond at noon. I love it. This is our relationship, people.
Thank you so, so much. Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.